Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Now joining me in studio is David Knight. Now, David, obviously in response to Obama's migrant resettlement plan, there's been a lot of uproar and a massive closed borders movement is taking place all across the country. People have been flooding the phone lines there in Washington, D.C. They've also been flooding social media, telling people to, call their congressional representatives, stop this resettlement of Middle Eastern migrants. And it must be working because now we have 21 U.S. states announcing that they're refusing to accept Syrian refugees, one of which, of course, now includes Louisiana, which we just learned last week. They had just begun accepting Syrian refugees. And then guess what? One of them went missing, and the missing refugee turned up out of state. And the charity organization that was, helping these refugees resettle them, they said, well, it's not our job to keep track of them. And the governor, the federal agents there, they didn't even learn about this missing refugee from the Obama administration. They learned about it through the media. And so, of course, in response, Governor Bobby Jindal issued an executive order preventing resettlement of Syrian refugees in the state of Louisiana. So, it doesn't matter if these states say we're not going to accept them. They can, once they're inside the United States, they can easily move about.
True. But we need to look at the most effective way to shut this thing down. And I think it's very important that as this began yesterday, went very rapidly from 6 to 21. Now it's over 25 states. Two of the states that were added yesterday evening, Leanne, were Massachusetts and Maine. This isn't something that's just Democrats. And this is a massive pushback. It is a legal way to do this. There's been some pushback from some of the media saying they don't have the legal right to do that. No, it is Obama who doesn't have the legal right to do what he's doing, opening up our borders and bringing people in. Let's take a look at something that happened 217 years ago. Just as the governors were pushing back against the federal overreach here, let's pull something out of the history bin, and it's not just dusty history. This has application to today. Now, 217 years ago in July, there were the Alien and Sedition Acts that the John Adams administration put in. That was a response to the French Revolution and an undeclared naval war with France. So this is put out there as measures of security. Where have we heard this before? Okay, well, what were they? Well, first of all, the Alien Act is kind of interesting because it's exactly the opposite of what this president is trying to do. They would give the president the authority to declare foreign residents to be enemies of the state and to jail or deport them. We have our president does just exactly the opposite. He takes enemies of the state, he brings them in, and he imports them in. But in both of these cases, what this is really about was rigging the system for people who supported your political party. Adams wanted to get rid of certain number of people certain kinds of people because they would not vote for his party. Obama wants to bring them in because he thinks they will, but also he has other issues going on with this. And then there was the Sedition Act. There have been numerous times in the history of America where presidents have decided that they are going to criminalize any dissent. Okay, the most recent edition of this was in 1917, the Espionage Act. And we have seen the Obama administration go after more people, reporters, whistleblowers, so forth, under the Espionage Act than all of the previous presidents combined. As a matter of fact, more than 3 times all the previous presidents combined. But right after it was passed in 1917, and of course it was put through by the Woodrow Wilson administration, it was done in response to the impending involvement in World War I. One of the first people to be prosecuted under the Espionage Act was a film director who did a film about the American Revolution. And in it, he showed the British to be very bad guys, probably exaggerated the case. But Woodrow Wilson didn't like that because he was going to be using the British as allies. So he fined this guy $5,000 in 1917 dollars. That's a huge fine, and put him in jail for 10 years.
Wow.
And the Supreme Court said, there is no First Amendment protection of movies. And the Supreme Court said, that's our opinion, and we're going to stick with it, and they did until the 1950s. In the 1950s, they said, okay, now we've decided that the First Amendment applies to movies. Now, that illustrates why we cannot appeal to Washington to do the right thing, to do the lawful thing, to do the constitutional thing. And Jefferson knew this at the very beginning. So when these Alien and Sedition Acts were passed in July, about 4 months later, 217 years ago yesterday, he secretly wrote and worked with his neighbor Madison to set up the Kentucky resolution, also Virginia resolutions, to establish the idea that it is the states that have the final say-so on this. Mm-hmm. And the immediate situation in Jefferson's case, as is pointed out by a New American article that you see right there on the screen, in Jefferson's case, he had his own congressional representative right there in his district who wrote a letter critical of the John Adams administration, and a grand jury there indicted him for libel. They were going to put him in jail. Jefferson wrote letters to the Virginia legislature and said, I want you to punish the grand jury. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't take prisoners, okay? He's an activist. Punish the grand jury for indicting this guy because we have a First Amendment that protects his speech. Well, he was cautioned by James Monroe, another president later on, who also was a neighbor of his, and he said, no, you should take this up with Congress. Jefferson said no, and this is what he said. It's of immense consequence that the state retain its complete authority as possible over its own citizens. The system of general government, in other words, the federal government, is to seize all doubtful ground. He knew that the feds, if anything was left ambiguous, they would take the power. Now, he went on to say in the Kentucky resolutions, which are done anonymously because he was fearful that he would be jailed and persecuted by John Adams. This is what it said, that the several states composing the United States of America are not united on the principle of unlimited submission to a general government. Do you get that? We are not united on the basis that we give up all of our power and all of our right to the federal government. That was what this country was founded on, and it was the American states who created the federal government. It would be the same as if we were to leave the United Nations, and the United Nations then said, you can't leave, and we're going to create an international army, and we're going to subjugate you. No, that's not what it was based on. He said that they have created a general government for special purposes, delegated to that government certain definite powers, and reserving to the state itself the residuary power. Well, of course, that's the 9th and 10th Amendment, as we see that. Okay, so he's repeating that again. And that was in the Constitution at that time. It was ratified in 1791. So he says, whenever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Okay, you don't have to appeal it to the federal government or to the Supreme Court. You just take it that way. And I think when we look at what's going on with medical marijuana, with recreational marijuana use, when you push back against federal authority that is overreaching, then the feds back off, just like they did Bundy Ranch, just like they did with Corbett and the TSA. They will do that with the states because they don't want people to understand that under our constitutional republic, the states have as much power as the federal government that they created, and the federal government is actually the smaller creature.
Right. Wow. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because we're seeing it now on social media. They're really kind of making this a moral conundrum. And they're saying, you know, obviously this is going to be a big thing now with this, when the GOP, the next debate and everything, it is going to be about prove your Christianity. There's the whole, they're tweeting out now about Matthew 25:35. When I was hungry, did you feed me? Did you give me something to drink? Did you clothe me? Did you give me shelter? And also pointing out, you know,
well, the Bible was putting up rules for individuals and how we deal with people one-to-one. It wasn't creating a constitution for government in the first place. So that is not, we have, one of the reasons that we're in the situation we are morally in this country is because the churches, especially the liberal churches, have abdicated their personal responsibility to the government. The government is not there as an institution of charity. It is an instrument of force, and we need to be very careful, like Washington said, it's like a fire. You don't want it to get out of control.
Right, and that's what I think is so important, because when you take these moral arguments and then a lot what we're seeing on social media is sort of throwing the Bible verses back at people that are trying to say, we can't do this, this is not safe. They're saying, well, what would you have done with the Jews when they were fleeing Nazi Germany? Well, there again, we were not dealing with an organization that was dealing in terrorist activity, where we were thinking that there was going to be some possible jihadis in with the Jewish refugees, right? And so that's what it is people are turning this into sort of a moral debate when it really is about protecting the lives of the American people. And yes, you know, I would love to be able to say, come on in. I'm sorry that our governments have been destroying your life.
Our government is destroying their life.
But, you know, like I said, we can't bring that here. Well, David, thank you so much. And stick around, because we're going to have some more from the Alex Jones Show right after this.
Dr. Group joins us for the balance of this hour to talk about solutions. We have them up every couple of weeks. We have been trying to launch this for the last year. We got all of the organic ingredients to do it. And we've come up with a new Living Defense Harmful Organism Cleansing dietary supplement, and it is extremely affordable. It is brimming with the capsules. And the way I read the facts, This could do a cleanse for really a family of 4 or 5 people. Dr. Group, let's just get into the product now and then into parasites themselves, what folks really want to hear about in the next segment. But thank you for developing this for InfoWarsLife.com. Tell us about Living Defense and why it's so special.
Well, it's really special because it's part of the problem that we're dealing with today. When the earth becomes sick and the earth soils become acidic and the internal bodies become acidic because of all the toxic food in the air and the beverages that people are consuming, it sets up an environment that's ripe for harmful organisms to live, either on the earth. That's why a lot of the plants are infested with harmful organisms, or inside the body. And years ago, we linked every single disease process to an overgrowth of organisms in the body. And when people hear the word parasite, which the FDA does not like us to use, they actually came down on us and made us take the word parasite off everywhere, because we were exposing what the globalists have been doing, spreading these parasites and creating this environment, which is great for them to live in, for years and years and years, because they know they drain us of energy, they make us sick. So we had to actually change the word parasite to harmful organism. And when we talk about harmful organisms, it's the definition, actually, the medical definition of parasite is any harmful organism that lives off of a host mechanism. Most people just think parasites are worms, but harmful organisms are bacteria, viruses that you can get through flu shots, funguses, yeast. We literally have an epidemic going on right now with molds and fungus and yeast living in everybody's body.
This is something that I heard about over a decade ago. I didn't really believe. I did one of these cleanses or invasive organism or harmful organism cleanses. It really hurt a lot, but it did do a lot. With this was not painful like some other cleanses I've done. The product is available at InfoWarsLife.com. I've always read and heard that just one of the ingredients, black walnuts, is really good at flushing parasites, and that, animals out in the fields eat them and stuff to naturally do this. We do cleanses on our dogs, our cats, our horses, our cows. Why not us?
Well, because they don't want you to know about that you need to do a parasite or a harmful organism cleanse. That's the thing. It's so secretive. And when we were doing our research into the root cause of every single disease, there's been plenty of proof.
The statistics are clear. 9 out of 10 people are infested with harmful organisms like parasites. Parasites can be transmitted by people, pets, food, and the environment, and so many other sources. Once parasites have made it inside your body, they steal your nutrients and release toxic waste. They use the bathroom inside of you. It's time to start eliminating toxic and harmful organisms from your body. Introducing Living Defense, the new harmful organism cleanser by InfoWarsLife.com. Living Defense uses wild-crafted organic herbs to help naturally cleanse harmful organisms from the body. We are expected to sell out of this very, very quickly. This is our limited first-time run. So visit InfoWarsLife.com today to try Living Defense today while supplies last.